This week in the news, game publisher Electronic Arts takes one massive leap forward in its mad race to ensure that it cancels Star Wars games more rapidly than it releases them.
Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include EA canceling another Star Wars project, a law firm seeking to build up a class action lawsuit against Activision Blizzard, a roundup of action RPG news, and more. As always, timestamps can be found in the video description. And right before we dive in, just a quick reminder to ring the sub-notification bell to be alerted of new Saturday episodes. Now, the first story we'll begin with is one that broke very late last week, too late to make it into last week's news video, but it turns out to be a little bit of a nothing burger story. Still, it is a very sensational headline. Class action lawsuit threatened against Activision Blizzard. How am I writing these headlines? This story was first brought to my attention while I was streaming, and I just burst out laughing because it's just one thing after another for Activision Blizzard. And of course, you have a whole bunch of people who are all rah rah, yeah, take him down. But upon further investigation, it sounds like this is probably not going to go anywhere. Basically, we have this Pomerantz law firm that is seeking clients for a class action lawsuit. And there's an investigation going on that, quote, concerns whether Activision and certain of its officers and or directors have engaged in securities fraud or other unlawful business practices. What this probably means is that right after the split between Activision Blizzard and Bungie, stocks went down. Activision Blizzard lost one of its assets. So, they're seeking to find out whether or not Activision Blizzard should have warned its shareholders if they knew that something was about to happen to tank stock prices. Now, many are interpreting this headline to mean Blizzard is getting sued, but that's not what's happening. It's basically just this law firm seeking to get clients to go after Activision Blizzard. And in these class action lawsuits, the big winners are the law firms. A class action lawsuit means a whole bunch of people suing collectively rather than just one entity. So what ends up happening, to my understanding, is that the law firm ends up getting a bigger share of the profits than any individual client. My buddy Nineball from the West March Workshop explained this as being very similar to what they refer to as ambulance chasers. Basically a lawyer that will chase after an ambulance knowing that there's an injured person in there so that they can immediately ask the injured party, hey, do you want to sue whoever's responsible for this? I'll be your lawyer. I'll be your lawyer. I want money. Will this case go somewhere? Maybe. If it does, it's most likely to settle out of court. But still, this headline is a far cry from Activision Blizzard being sued. Now, before we move on, I'd like to take a minute for a word from this video's sponsor and talk about an MMORPG called Return of Warrior. Now, this game first launched in North America in 2004 as Risk Your Life. It was very well received at the time. I'm sure some of you have heard of it and even played it. By 2005, it had something like 1.25 million players worldwide, and it was considered to be one of the best PvP MMORPGs of the time. So if you're looking for a blast from the past, Risk Your Life is back, relaunching as Return of Warrior, and is currently in open beta. I've played it a bit. The game has an old school charm to it for those seeking a classic MMORPG experience. There's a heavy focus on PvP, be it dueling or giant team fights. It's a sort of open world PvP that you can't quite get in a lot of games these days. You pick one of two factions, and it's this faction war that drives all the PvP. Combat is more involved than traditional MMOs. It isn't just point and click. You have 14 different classes to choose from, and if you'd like to check out Return of Warrior, follow the tracking link in the video description below. In other news, a new trailer for Mortal Kombat 11 has released. Now, I gotta ask you folks, how many Mortal Kombat fans do we have out there? Because my first gaming experience, well, I don't know about my very first, but Super Nintendo was my first main gaming platform before I became a PC gamer, and Mortal Kombat, or the various Mortal Kombats, were my favorite games. I can't say that's held true in recent years, but Mortal Kombat will always hold a special place in my heart, and this trailer just looks really awesome. This is what Mortal Kombat is. The violence, the gore, the cool characters. It's just really nice to see this series, after so many years, still call back to its roots, still retain the essence of what made it so great. I can't say I dig the music that they're playing, but damn if this isn't a cool trailer. The game releases on April 23rd. If you pre-order, you get Shao Kahn, and it looks like there's going to be maybe 25 characters at launch. Some characters that I'm able to recognize here are Baraka, Scarlet, Shao Kahn, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Raiden, Sonya, who's being voiced by Ronda Rousey, for reasons that I could only assume are a PR stunt. We see Kung Lao and Cassie Cage, and then we got some new antagonists here. Chronica and her goon Garrus. Looks like Garrus is some kind of time-manipulating Sandman. I'll drop links in the video description to these two trailers. Alright, on to one of our biggest stories of the week. EA has cancelled another Star Wars game. As reported by Kotaku, EA has allegedly cancelled its open-world Star Wars game. Now, a little backstory. Years ago, Visceral Games, developers of Dead Space, were working on a Star Wars game. It would have been a linear action-adventure title. And of course, this was happening under the purview of Electronic Arts. But then in October of 2017, EA shut down Visceral Games. And EA Vancouver, the studio that they had helping Visceral with the game, took over development of the game. Basically, EA was unhappy with Visceral's development of the Star Wars game, so they shut down Visceral, and they rebooted development on the title. So they've effectively canceled and killed what Visceral had made, and they reimagined the title in a different light. So rather than a linear action adventure, this new Star Wars game was going to be open world, because market trends. It involved playing either a scoundrel or a bounty hunter, visiting planets throughout the system, and working with different factions across the Star Wars universe. But now this project as well, which apparently was in very early development, has been cancelled. And the reason seems to basically be, oh crap, it's 11 p.m. My assignment's due tomorrow morning. Screw that 3-act novella that I wanted to make. We'll just bang out a quick short story. Basically, EA needed a game that could release sooner than this big open world project. So allegedly they canceled this in favor of a smaller scale Star Wars game that could be pushed out maybe by around late 2020, which is roughly when the next gen consoles are expected to launch. Because at this point, it's been 6 years into EA's 10-year exclusivity deal to release Star Wars games on PC and console. And all they've managed to do is crank out 2 titles and cancel 2 others. And those games are Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now thankfully we still have Jedi Fallen Order that's set to release in late 2019. Fingers crossed that doesn't get canceled. It's an action-adventure being developed by Respawn, and I'm really hoping that it's good because it's just staggering that the past 30 years has seen dozens of Star Wars games and very few Star Wars movies. But the past 10 years, the past 6 years, have seen a bunch of Star Wars movies and very few Star Wars games. I can't imagine Disney believing that EA is doing a good job managing this property. We've historically seen quality and quantity Star Wars games release, relying on just brand name alone without even having any movies release to stir interest. Now we've got annual, or even more so, Star Wars movie releases. Perfect windows of opportunity to release games to capitalize on the Star Wars brand being at the forefront of everyone's attention. And all that EA has managed to do in 6 years is release one middling game and one game that created such uproar that it caused government investigations into loot boxes. I still mourn the loss of Star Wars 1313. That was going to be that mature, gritty, bounty hunter themed Star Wars game, which of course was cancelled shortly after Disney bought Star Wars in April 2013. And it was shortly thereafter that EA worked out that exclusivity deal with Disney, and I can't help but wonder, did they have any idea of what to do with Star Wars once they would acquire this deal? Did they just imagine, oh, we'll never get this deal, just make them a lowball offer, we just want to make it seem like we're interested, but we really don't want this property? Because one could almost think that they got this exclusivity deal and now are just pumping out the bare minimum number of games in order to meet their contractual obligations, but their main goal is just to ensure that no Star Wars games release. Yeah, we just want like a 10-year period where just done with Star Wars games. Don't want people buying Star Wars games. Now, allegedly, EA's Motive Studio in Montreal is also working on a small Star Wars project, so I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the next few years. Is EA just going to barf out as many Star Wars games in the next 4 years as possible, realizing, oh crap, we've been procrastinating too much? Or who knows, maybe Disney and EA are in some collective agreement to just ruin Star Wars for everyone forever. In other news, Path of Exile has released its 2019 development plan. Basically, 2019 will see the release of 4 significant PoE updates in the form of 3.6 in March, 3.7 in June, 3.8 in September, and 3.9 in December. Quote, "These releases will follow the formula we have been using over the last 4 years, introducing a challenge league, various expansion features, new characters, skills, and archetypes to play, and masses of other fixes and quality of life improvements." The devs stated that they also hope to make significant progress on the 4.0.0 mega expansion, which is likely coming sometime in 2020. And as a reminder, Path of Exile 4.0 was intended to compete with a potential Diablo 4. Given everything that they've been doing with this version of Path of Exile, I can't imagine what crazy new features they have coming for Path of Exile 4.0.0. But we won't have to wonder for too much longer. It's still pretty long. Basically, in November, they're going to have a small preview of 4.0.0 at ExileCon, their first ever Path of Exile convention. And we can expect to hear news about 3.6 in about a month. As a reminder, Path of Exile is set to release on PS4 in the month of February, assuming there's no further delays. And lastly, I just want to call your attention to this awesome infographic made by community member Avunaos. Again, link in the video description, but some interesting stats are that Elementalist is the most popular Ascendancy class in softcore, but in hardcore, it seems that the Occultist is the most popular for successful hardcore players. On to some quick Overwatch news. The Lunar New Year event returns January 24th to February 18th. And Blizzard actually worked with YouTuber Delongu, the creator of Katsuwatch, to make an animated short to go with Anna's Bastet challenge. Link in the description. On to some Last Epoch news. A massive patch, the biggest patch yet for Last Epoch, has released. Patch 0.6 is implementing the rest of Chapter 2, part of Chapter 3. We're getting new zones, new side zones, new quests, a bunch of new enemies. There's almost a complete revamp of the user interface, new skills, skill revisions, new item sets, big rework to the attribute system, lots of bug fixes, and more. I'll have a link to those patch notes down below. And they've also reworked the Knight class, renaming it the Sentinel, and there's another blog post with full details on that. On to Diablo news. Patch 2.6.4 launched this week, and later in the week, Season 16 launched. If you're wondering what class to play in Season 16, we've got this video here describing, in my opinion, what are the best starter classes. And of course, we also have our tier list video over here, but we're already seeing some shakeups. So do stay tuned for an updated tier list, as some builds are rising higher than I anticipated. And in other Diablo news, also this week, we saw the release of Median XL Sigma. This is the latest version of the Median mod for Diablo 2, a mod that's been around for ages. It is a massive overhaul of Diablo 2. It is a total conversion mod. This is not a mod to play if you want to have a nostalgic visit through Diablo 2. This is a mod to play if you want to experience Diablo 2 in an entirely different way. If you're a Diablo 2 fan looking for a fresh Diablo 2 experience, I encourage you to check that out. Link in the video description. And that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video, where we discuss, effectively, the Alien Immortal fiasco. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider becoming a Royal Raider on Patreon, where your support is immensely appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.